Hola, amigos. Sweatshop Book Club, episode 4. 4. A lot of books going down right now. The only rules are you gotta have a good book and you gotta have plant or plants around you. It's just, and them's the rules. Feast, Fast, Fit by Fred Duncan, subtitled Train Your Body to Torch Fat, Build Muscle, and Never Diet Again, featuring a customizable fat loss plan for men and women. This is geared mostly towards fat loss. And normally when I see the terms torch fat and build muscle within the same sentence or breath, I'm typically wary, but this isn't the case with Duncan. This is really salient information from start to finish. It starts off with a bang and keeps it going the entire way. This is 45 pages. The last 2 pages are referenced. The page prior is author bio, but you can tell there's not a lot of fluff in this, and that is for good reason. It gets down into the nitty gritty really quick, and it is very lackluster in regards to BS, which is fantastic. So basic concept for this is intermittent fasting, of course. This is suggested for yourself, if you have clients that you're doing any kind of nutrition with, whether they're athletes or not. This is highly customizable, and that's the whole idea behind it, and it's geared towards physiology as well, whether you're a man or a woman. So feast, you're eating within a certain window of time. Fasting, you're not eating within a certain window of time, very simple, yeah. And fit, you're doing some kind of activity, some kind of training, and the calories and macronutrients also, which go hand in hand, of course, as we know and we talked about, they are very important for this training component. So 3 things that I want to get into, and I don't want to read the book, obviously, because that would take forever, even though it's only a couple pages, and you could do it in one fell swoop, which is another fantastic thing to do because I've read this and now I can reference back to it multiple times over. But 3 things that I want to get into this in regards to the more salient points I'm going to read really quick is cortisol. This is important because a lot of people have a terrible idea of why cortisol could be good and why it's bad, and it's just convoluted, and this is really quick and understanding within 4 paragraphs. But isn't cortisol evil? Not exactly. Cortisol is not good or bad. It's just a hormone. Yeah. There are times where you want the presence of cortisol and times you don't. It's kind of like your family. I felt that. Those who pit intermittent fasting against cortisol use flawed reasoning, cherry-pick studies, and show a lack of understanding of physiology. Cortisol is released in a pulsatile fashion, not all at once, of course, right? Elevating at night and typically peaking around 8 a.m. This natural cortisol spike in the morning is important to trigger fat burning, regulate blood sugar, and supply us with energy to begin the day. Yes, cortisol will briefly increase during fasting, but it will then lower once food is reintroduced. Exercise, coffee, and low carbohydrate diets also increase cortisol. Yet nobody warns you about that, right? These acute responses are normal and healthy. Chronic, high levels of cortisol should be avoided, as this can negatively impact the immune system and disrupt health. Lack of sleep and high stress are often the main culprits. We know this. We talked about this before. If you're struggling with cortisol, start there. However, intermittent fasting, when done properly, will not have a negative effect on overall cortisol numbers. Cortisol ain't that bad. It's a stimulus we need to adapt to. It's good for growth. This is important also. Fasting won't eat your muscle. This is something that people rant and rave about. The mythology of if you're not eating within a certain window, you're going to lose muscle, there's sarcopenia going on, whatever. Nope. I've used fasting diets with bodybuilders, pro athletes, and powerlifters, all people who need to keep their muscle. It is a non-issue if overall calories and protein intake are maintained. I want to stop there for a second. Overall calories and protein intake are maintained. A thermogenic, effective food, whether you're eating 6 meals or 4 meals or 1 meal a day, is the exact same. So that doesn't matter. I don't want to hear it. The other side of that is if you're eating the same amount of calories per 24 hours, if you're eating it once, twice, or within 3 or 4 meals, it's still the same amount of calories. Distension is another thing, though. So depending on how many calories you're eating, if I'm eating 3,000 calories a day with how I'm eating, and I eat 1 meal of 3,000 calories, I'm going to have some distension in my stomach because it's a lot of volume of food, yeah? For me, if I cut it into 3 to 4 meals within 8 to 10 hours, within that window of eating, I do really, really well, and I feel like my stomach isn't distended, and that's the main reason why I haven't been eating a lot of what I've been eating, but that's neither here or there. Back to quoting this. If you read my series on intermittent fasting on fredduncan.com, there's a good plug, you will see that intermittent fasting actually beats traditional calorie restriction in terms of muscle retained. There's an annotation there. There are also a handful of studies done on athletes, rugby, soccer, during Ramadan and all-day, everyday fasting that show the preservation of lean mass and loss of fat. Another annotation reference there. Another recent study, 2017, comparing calorie restriction versus intermittent fasting showed that the intermittent fasting group lost significantly more fat and strength was retained equally between both groups. Bing, bang, boom. There you go. Now, I would like to also say that this book is pro-intermittent fasting if you haven't been able to tell, and you can find references and studies on different things depending on what your viewpoint and perspective is. You can find studies that help your perspective, and you can find studies that are combative towards that. It's just depending what's going on, and there are cherry picking studies in related to anti-intermittent fasting, and you know, it's just a lot of hoopla no matter where you're at. So the last point I wanted to make was about foods being good or bad, clean or dirty, whatever. This is perspective as well. Here we go. You should be careful labeling foods as good or bad, as this is purely subjective. If you are gluten intolerant, oatmeal may be a bad food for you, though most people would say oatmeal is clean and healthy. A lot of protein-rich foods or whey may cause serious issues for those with irritable bowel syndrome or Crohn's disease, whereas a lot of people do just fine with these foods. So instead, you should view foods by whether or not they make sense for your specific goals and your own digestive health. Do I think some choices are more nutritious than others? Sure, but moderation is key, and your results will be the guide. That's pretty fantastic. So his 2 cents: define your goal, number 1. Number 2, see what foods you can fit into your program without hindering your success. Boom, there you go. So judging progress is important. Moving on from there, this doesn't lay out plans and then it's like, see you around. There's also a follow-up with what you should be seeing. So I would suggest this, even if you're not doing too much physical activity in terms of sport. If you're doing something like running or something really recreational in regards to not having a competition goal, this is also fantastic in just getting control of your nutrition. So intermittent fasting with good protocols and a lot of good satire and a good voice, like I mentioned before, within Duncan's writing. So really couldn't suggest this book more. There you go. Ciao.